So I am changing these injectors. If you look, I've already kind of started removing these. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen all of these ones on this side, the caps, and then we're gonna remove the 10mm bolts kind of spread across this fuel rail, and then also the ground up there, and we should be able to just pull the fuel rail right up. So we'll do that here next. And like I said, I wanted to remove these screw heads while it's on the car, because doing this, it's already hard enough to remove these without stripping them, so you want it to kind of be stable. So I'm going to do it on the car, and then we can go ahead and remove the whole fuel rail. Now if you use the appropriate Phillips head, these should sit perfectly, and then oh, I think I cracked this one already. Just push down on it while you remove it. I think I loosened it, yeah. Oh, here we go, here's one. So just push down on it, and you should be able to break these loose. And just make sure to take your time, because stripping one of these, it is annoying. I mean, you can get it out with like you'd be able to get it out with a vice grip, sorry. That's another way to remove these if you get stuck, but yeah, these injectors are coming out because I am going with the new style injectors. Now we can go ahead and remove the whole fuel rail. Alright, so when removing this, just be very gentle, just not to get anything where it's not supposed to be. It should just come out just like that. So you want to make sure nothing goes down those. I did get also new injector seals, so these are probably OEM from originally when the car was made, so I highly doubt these were replaced, and they are very hard. So I'm gonna tape this up again just to be safe, nothing falls in there. Okay, so just taped all the injector holes, and I'm gonna cover this up for now until I'm ready to go back on there. But we're gonna go ahead and clean this rail up, remove the fuel injectors. I'm also replacing all the lines. All right, so before I put all this back, this is the lower timing cover where it has the markings for your timing. On the non-turbo version, you want 15 degrees. So I masked off the 15-degree spot right here so that I can use a paint pen, and when I'm timing it, it'll be a lot easier to see. So I'll show you what that looks like once I'm done. So if you look, I have my paint pen right on the 15-degree mark, and then on the crank you'll see a little notch there. Same thing. It's already hard enough to time this when you barely can see it, so makes it a heck of a lot easier when you see those markings on the light. Alright, and just like that, it's ready to go. Same thing on the crank pulley. Again, something so little goes a long way when you're trying to get that done. Okay, so before I throw the fuel injectors into the old style rail, I wanted to show you the difference between the older injectors, the one that it came with, I believe it was from 90 to 93. Then the late style or newer style, this came on the 94 to 96. And the difference, if you look, it is still side feed. The main difference was the pintle cap. If you look, it has one, I don't know if this will focus, but it has one little hole where the fuel will come out. And on the late style or the newer style, let's see if I can focus here. I don't know if it'll show on camera, but there are 4 tiny little holes versus the one on the older style. So what that does, when the fuel sprays out, the fuel pattern or the spray pattern will be a lot more dispersed, and will create a better combustion just because it atomizes the fuel a lot better on the newer style. And on top of that, obviously these are 20 plus years old or whatever, like 23 years old now, because mine's a 1990. So it's good to replace them anyways. When I took out the 6 of these, 3 of them were replaced, 3 were still OEM. So the other 3 were obviously bound to go out. Also, to run these new injectors on the later style fuel rail, you'll need some kind of conversion kit. I got mine from this company called Clean Injection. Really nice kit. The CNC top caps, the bolts, everything. It looks like a good quality kit, and it was actually half the price of the one on like Z Concepts. The reason why you need this, if you notice, the old style, to sit in the rail, the top O-ring right here, if we match that up, the place where it actually sits in the rail, there's an O-ring inside the rail. If you look on the newer style injectors, the only difference, so the top, same, but the bottom portion, that's where it's not gonna sit in the rail right. So if you look right here, we're missing the diameter that it needs to be. So this kit comes with the adapter. If you look, I've already put it on these ones. Just make sure when you slide this on, you're using some kind of Vaseline or assembly lube, because it can bind just like any other O-ring, it can bind and break. So make sure that's well lubed, slides on just like this. And now if you notice, with the adapter on, the portion of where it's gonna sit in the fuel rail, it's now matching from here and here. Lastly, the top caps are different. So if you look, this has like a rounder one on the old style. The new style has like this, the more rectangular top, as well as a different plug, which comes in here, which I like because also comes with hex bolts versus the Phillips that the old ones have. Last but not least, you have the adapter harness, so you can use your stock wiring harness for your injectors, and it converts it to the newer style plug. I'm actually going to cut these so that I can just solder them in, one less point of failure. So now that we're done with all the timing components and everything's torqued down, now we can actually put on the coolant bypass housings. So we'll put that on, and then the upper and lower, actually before I do the upper and lower pipe, we're gonna go ahead and do the water pump as well. All right, so I just got a clean bead all the way around, nice little layer, and then I kind of ran my finger in the inside portion, so that way when it does mate, you'll have a small bead around it, and that's pretty much it. So, all right, I'm gonna put this on before it dries up anymore, and then I also kept my old water pump here, and I left the bolts where they're supposed to be, so that way it was easier to install when it was time. All right, so if you look, these are all finger tight, and if you also check it out, the portion of sealant that's coming out is a nice clean bead, and it's just not like completely oozing out, which is what you want. So I'm gonna let this cure for a little bit before I torque it down, and then we'll move on to the coolant bypass adapters here. If I can get this to focus, same thing, nice thin coat on there, nice and even, and I'll do it to the other side. Place it on, and then just finger tight for these. Okay, so if you look, water pump's on. The torque specs for the water pump I just checked was they're 12 to 15 foot-pounds. Same thing with the thermostat housing, so the upper and lower coolant pipes, those are also 12 to 15. And these bypass adapters, or yeah, the bypass pipe adapters, these, it says snug. I think I'm just gonna go 12 to 15 as well. So I'm gonna let this cure a little bit longer. It's cold out, so I think in 50 minutes to an hour would be fine. And again, these are all pretty much as tight as I could do it with my hand on the socket. So that way it has a nice good mating surface, and then we'll torque it down. So next on our list, we want to clean up all of the surface right here where the valve covers will mate to the actual head. Gotta be careful though, because if you get silicone in here, probably not a good thing to get jammed up in here for the oil galleys, and then you won't have proper oil flow, which is again very important on pretty much any motor that you're dealing with. So I'm gonna take a vacuum cleaner as I sand this off, because I already took a little blade scraper here, just to get the majority of all this stuff off. If you notice on the intake side, you won't see a lot of that because it is using a gasket. And then on this, we're going to be using gasket maker. In the rear, you'll also see a half moon. Make sure we take that off and clean that up real nice. And before I even put the valve covers on, you'll notice right here, I had to kind of twist a clamp off of it. But anyways, this right here is one of the ports for the coolant hose, which normally would go into the intake, but we deleted all that. So we're gonna be taking a water hose. I purchased new ones. This is gonna go and meet up with right here so that you can close the loop. And then on this side right here, you'll notice these two are the ones that you connect. So I'll do that beforehand because it is kind of in the way when you have the valve covers on. I used 8mm heater hose. If you notice, I also used actual hose clamps instead of just the standard clamps that are usually on there, like these, the pinch clamps. I wanted something where I didn't have to worry about it leaking. So if you look, these are both secure now. All right, and if you notice, this side is all done too, nice and tight. Doesn't matter if it's kinked because in the end, you are just blocking these off. Okay, so I decided just to run these iridiums. They're the BKR 5EIX11. Basically, it's iridium pre-gapped 1.1, which I double checked. Two of them were a little shy of 1.1, so I fixed that. I know you're not supposed to gap these, they say, but as long as you're really careful of not hitting that electrode, you'll be fine. So I put some anti-seize on there, and then I'm going to reinstall them after cranking the motor a couple times, because when you get the belt on, you do want to circulate the belt at least twice over. Before doing so, again, verify that each of the markings on the timing belt are where they're supposed to be. Now that the spark plugs are out, I won't have as much resistance. And then when it's all said and done, this guy here, once you rotate that 2 revolutions, it should have anywhere from a 3.3 to 5.5, I think it said, millimeter gap. So it's good where it's at right now, even if it were to open up a little bit. So I'm going to do the rotations before putting the spark plugs in. And all I'm doing is just making sure that this comes back up over here. And if you look, she opened up a little bit here. So now that's probably closer to about 5 millimeters, which I'll get my feeler gauge out and we'll check that. All right, so I just got that second revolution done. If you notice what I was saying, that these don't match up anymore, which is normal, because again, that's just to get it all set up the first time. And with my feeler gauge here, pretty much use almost all the tabs here, but this is about 3.3, so it fits perfectly in there, which is what I wanted. I wanted the smallest as far as spec goes, so that way you have the most room for adjustment or tension, auto tension later on as the belt stretches. So perfect. So now that this is done, I'm gonna go ahead and put the spark plugs back in, and then we should be able to start putting the hoses. And I think the next before the hoses, after the hoses, I'm gonna put the fuel rail in. All right, spark plugs are in. So like I said, all these go in a specific order. So you don't want to put your covers on first, because this goes underneath the cover. So we're gonna put this on. That's it. Yeah, not a lot, because it's the aluminum block behind it. So, all right, and then on the CAS there is a O-ring on there. Just make sure you lube that up so that way you don't tear it. And then we'll kind of turn it over and over here just to make sure. I think I'm gonna put a little bit of grease on here too, just so that way. But if you notice, there is a little stopper like part in the middle where it's like half of the dowel, so there's only one way for this to go in. Okay, so I had to remove the CAS housing because I couldn't get it in right, and it was fitting in 2 different ways. I don't know if I'll be able to show you guys this. Let me see if I can get my light. All right, so you guys, I had to take my the CAS bracket off. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this, so I'll probably just throw a picture up. You can kind of see it, but there's a little keyway in there so that this goes in one way. And inside your exhaust cam, you'll see the same thing right there, but if you look, mine's broken. I looked it up. I guess it's common that these break. You can see it where it would have been. So on the actual CAS, I'm going to make sure that the key portion is at the bottom, so that way it slides in where it's supposed to. You'll notice there's a little almost like a pin on this side and on this side. This is what keeps the little keyway inside, so it's a good indication of whether it's up or down. So on where I'm going to want it, I'm going to want this side up, which makes it so the keyway is down. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically you want to make it go in there, slide this in there as if that keyway was still here. So if you look again, if this is the top portion, we want the keyway on the CAS to be in the bottom portion. So I'm gonna put the bracket back on now that I have this situated, and I know that this is gonna be the top. It should slide in there and give us the right timing. Worst case, if it's not, even though everything's together, we should still be able to take this out and redo it if we need to. All right, so I didn't get to show you since I put these ones already. Definitely put some sealant in these places just because that's where it tends to leak. So, and this is the one that has a rubber gasket already, but you still want to put it in those key areas. All right, so I fastened down this valve cover. Because it has a sealant on there, I did just lightly tighten all the bolts, and then when it comes down to about 30-45 minutes or so, then I'll tighten these down to the torque, just so that way the sealant has some time to harden a little bit, and then it makes a good seal. But I did lay out the hoses that the Z1 kit came with. These are for the PCV, and if you notice, this one will go on this side just because it does have a smaller diameter over here, and then the larger one for the actual PCV valve. So this one's on the passenger side with the smaller end, and then on the driver's side it'll be over here on the rear valve cover. And if you look that size, you can't mistake them. It's the same size as the PCV. So that's on this side, and this again also still has, I don't think, yeah, you can kind of see it. There's a little restrictor in there. And then last but not least, this is the rear PCV, which goes between the IAC valve and this rear fitting for the valve cover. Okay guys, so I got the rear hose in, and this one, if you can do this when you're putting your valve cover on, it'll be the easiest. And I was afraid of that, but I managed to make it work. I don't want to take it off again after figuring it out, because what I was doing is slipping this side on, and it was just way too close to be able to put the other side. So what I did, I'm just taking a different hose. Obviously this isn't the same one. I squeezed them like this together, got one on and then the other, and then I was able to extend them into the actual spot they're supposed to be in. All right, got this side off just to give you an idea of how brittle it sounds. Listen, it literally feels and sounds like a hard piece of plastic now, and this should be soft. The shorter side is the driver's side for the valve cover hose in the front. And then if you notice, the longer one is on the passenger side, and this one clears. The other one on this side, it was just hitting this and it wasn't going straight forward. So this is the way it's supposed to go. Longer side passenger, and then shorter side is on the driver's side. All right, so next I'm gonna put the bypass hoses on. So those go over here, and with the put the clamps there so that's ready to go as well. Okay, so now I got those on there all nice. Like I said, I have to wait until I put the covers, which will be next, but before I put the covers, I'm gonna go ahead and put the center galley, they call it like garnish, I think is what they call these. Lower covers on. Don't forget to put your washer over here. And then I also like to take some sandpaper to the inside of here. That way it can have less resistance to slide in. And I'm also going to put some grease in there too. Alright, so the same thing on this. If you look, there's a nice little thin bead around the whole thermostat housing. This is as tight as I can get it with my hands. And then again, same thing, wait about 30 minutes, then torque it down. I'm going to do the same thing with the upper pipe. Which will be a little bit harder because I also have to mate it with this. So I'm going to have to figure out the best way to do that without getting silicone everywhere, because you do have to silicone seal that. So. Alright, PSA guys, I had to remove this and I had to work quickly because I didn't want to have to redo the gasket. Do the top one first. It makes it, when you do the bottom one first, it makes it impossible to get the clamps on. Alright guys, so we're at the home stretch. Pretty much everything's installed. Hoses are on there. Now, finally we can get to the fuel rail. I'm just going to clean this up with some scotch and maybe some brake clean. I'm not going to paint this. I don't really care to. I won't see it. And honestly, just been wanting to get this done. So I'll just clean this the best I can. I will be replacing these fuel hoses. And while I'm doing that, I've already cleaned up one of the throttle bodies. This is what it looks like currently on the other one. And it's what it did look like before. So I wanted to make sure we cleaned all that. And also the fuel rail, the main fuel rail lines, right, the hard lines right here with the FPRs. All these are going to get new hoses as well. New fuel line is on. If you look, same length. And this is a 5/16 hose. So now that that's done, like I said, I cleaned this up as much as I wanted to, and I just kind of clean up the mating surfaces as well as the surfaces that are going to sit in the actual new seals that go into the plenum. So I'll remove those in a sec, but yeah, those will sit nicely now because everything's all cleaned up. And then of course, where the actual injectors are gonna sit inside here, made sure everything is nice and smooth, no debris. That way it makes a nice good seal. Like I did before, I already lubed up the inside O-ring here, so I'm going to lube up the outside O-rings and then make sure we sit them in there nice and snug. Perfect. Go. All right, all of them are in. Okay, just to show you where I'm at, got the left side done, and then I'm going to zoom in, if it'll let me here. There we go. So you can see the seal right there. And I'm going to tighten down from the middle first. You should start to see that completely sit in. Now before I go any further, I want to make sure that the other ones are following the same. Yep, so if you look, those are sitting in their seats right there, nothing's binding. Alright, so for the fuel hard lines, we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing as the fuel rail, replace all these old hoses, but this time we're just gonna use a little bit of YouTube magic. So, alright, so all new hoses, and I also got the vacuum lines, because the vacuum lines that were on here, I mean, they're pretty crusty, and also the tips of them were split, so it's time to replace. Alright, so before I do that, let's make sure everything is out of the way, including removing this tape, so that way we can get the gasket in the right spot. Alright, so just gotta make sure that you don't forget your plenum gasket. There's only one way for this to go on. If you try to do it this way, it just won't line up. So it's the rubberized tacky portion is going to be face down, and I think that's just to help it so that it doesn't move around. So if you notice this part right here, it's like it makes it kind of a tacky feel, so that way it doesn't slide around as easy. All right, guys, moment of truth. Oh. So I'm just gonna place it there for now so I can plug everything in. It might be difficult once it's actually in there. So I'm gonna plug in the IAC stuff and make sure the hoses are in the right spot. All right, guys, so yeah, that actually wasn't too difficult. I just kind of placed it on there. A little tip here: one, make sure you put your EGR gaskets on, your new ones, and you do need to kind of move that pipe into the manifold if you're running this still, the EGR, I mean. Same thing with this side, you gotta kind of coax that in before it drops, and then from there, once it drops, it kind of sits in the place it's supposed to. And now I'm gonna put the bolts on. All right, guys, so I've run into a little problem here with the conversion injectors. Let me get a light. All right, so I hit a little bit of a snag here. If you notice the injector right there, the harness, I had to lift it up a little bit because I was like, okay, I can't plug that in once I had everything bolted down. So I lifted it up, plugged in the injector plug first, and now it is getting in the way from actually mating to the surface of the actual head. Their intake won't go down all the way. So I don't really have many options. I thought maybe I could flip it so it comes out this way, but then it would literally get in the way of the actual main plenum. So I might have to actually take the plenum off and grind this spot over here just so I can actually get this to fit. All right, so it didn't really take me very long to see that this is an issue with switching over to the late cell injectors. So that is the trick, is to just Dremel or grind away that area. So I have to grind away about 1/2 inch. This is just a bracket, so I don't want to go too much because it does hold, you know, this front stay right here, and we need to do what we need to do. So I'm going to mark this off of where I'm going to need a cut. Okay, so now I have my area, and I'm going to take the plenum off once more, and we're going to go ahead and cut that out. Alright, so if you don't have one of these tools, a little handheld belt sander, definitely get one because it helped in this application here. So there's my little grinding area, so I can hopefully, I did go a little bit more than what I needed just so I didn't have to keep going back and forth. It doesn't look too you know, it looks pretty clean. Took my vacuum and kind of blew this area. I'm gonna wipe it all down once more just so there's no debris. But this should, cross our fingers, go in there now. All right, so that did the trick. Just so you guys can see how much space I have. Like I said, I did it a little bit more than I really needed to, but just by a hair. So now this is ready to go. I'm gonna kind of try to make that clean. So yeah, after you get that done, then we're gonna go ahead and wire in the fuel injectors and get the coil packs in. It's kind of hard to record this, but yeah, so basically you just gotta solder each one. It doesn't really matter which wire goes to which, because the fuel injectors on this act almost like a solenoid, just on and off. So yeah, as long as you have them connected, you're good to go. All right, so last one's done. Got the shrink wrap on there, and I'm just gonna tape it up so it's nice and clean. And I'll plug it back in, and we're done with the injectors. So all of the fuel injection wires have been replaced with the new one, and I'm glad I did replace those because they were super crusty and cracked. So if you look, all of these are plugged in now. I did put the balance tube on. Make sure you don't forget the O-rings when you put those on. So now the balance tube can go on, so we have that all secured. Now before I plug in the coil packs and the easy stuff, I did want to tighten my crank pulley. Now on an automatic transmission, it's a lot harder because you can't lock it out. You can't like put it in gear, it still rotates. So there's a trick. So you can use a toe strap and you wrap it around the crank pulley several times, because the actual torque on this, it should be around, the torque on the crank pulley on this is 169 to 174 foot-pounds. So it's pretty hefty. So I'm gonna set this up and then I'll show you what we're doing here. All right, so if you look right here, I basically just wrapped the toe strap several times around the crank pulley, and it's locked over here on the front subframe. I'm going to pull this line taut, and hopefully it'll stop the crank pulley from moving. And obviously we're gonna be tightening it, so you wanna wrap it this way, so that way it kind of pulls on there and we can still lock this up. There we go. Okay, so that's 170. It's always scary to go that heavy on these, because 174 foot-pounds, I mean, that's a lot of torque on that. So, but that's good now. Now I can just focus on the easy stuff. I just wiped down all the coil packs, just a nice little quick clean, and then I'm gonna put dielectric grease in all of the connections where the spark plug is gonna go in, and just try to look down there, make sure and verify that the spring is in there, because if that falls off and there's no connection, you'll have misfire. So correction on this, make sure you don't put your balance tube on yet, because you will not be able to get your coil packs in the rear. So I just had to take it off really quick. Make sure that the O-rings are still seated correctly, and also this is the part number Z190436. This is from Z Concepts, I believe. So, but yeah, those are the part numbers for that if you want to go through them. So I'm gonna plug these in and fuel rail. Okay, so now that these are secured, bracket goes on there. The grounds, just make sure you have two of them. That's going to go underneath with the fuel rail bracket. It's going to go over here on this side, and then you have one back here on the harness that's going to go right over here on the back of the I don't know if you guys can see that, on the back of the manifold. So I'm going to get those secured. And I also went ahead and just took some sandpaper to the parts where I painted, just so make sure it has a good connection. And then we can get the fuel rail on, and if you look down there is where, I don't think you can see it, but down there is where the fuel rail, where we're going to connect to these 2 points here. And just like that, new lines, everything's all clamped down. So for now, before I put all the belts on and the radiator, I'm just gonna quickly prime it, and actually I have to do the oil too, but I do want to make sure I hear it start and then I can keep going. But before anything, I'm going to prime it, not start it yet, make sure that there are no leaks on any of the fuel fittings. So we'll do that first. I'll plug in the battery, and yeah, this should be the first start in about 2 weeks now. All right, so let's go ahead and prime it. Make sure we have no leaks. I'm gonna do it a couple times here. Well, so far so good. All right, let's see. First start. Sounds good. Visually checking, make sure there's no leaks on anything. Alright. So yeah, no belts right now. No alternator, no power steering. I just wanted to get it to start. Since it's not fully warm, I'm not going to let it fully warm up, so it doesn't really matter, but yeah, she sounds good. Nice. Okay, so now that I've verified the engine is running, sounds great. Drive belts. So you'll have 2 that are 4-ribbed, 1 that has 3. So obviously the 3-rib is going to be your power steering, just on one part of the pulley. And then your longer of the 2 4-ribs will be your water pump and your alternator. So that will be the one that you put on first, since it's all the way in the back. Okay, so everything is all tightened down. Rule of thumb when you do this, tighten them up just so they are semi-tight. You don't want to go full on, because when you do tighten it up, it kind of puts stress on one portion more than the other. It's not even. So I'll tighten them all up. Just so if you guys want to go with this brand, these are the part numbers. I believe these are the 4-rib. This is a longer version, shorter one. So this is going to be the one for the alternator in the back. Again, this shorter one will be AC, and then this one is the power steering. I'm gonna let this warm up a little bit and try to fill it up with the distilled water. And I have some coolant flush I'm gonna use, and then I'll put actual coolant. Alright guys, so I had to put it back on the stands and basically raise the front of the car up, because no matter what I did, I couldn't get the water to cycle through. I would feel the bottom what do you call it, the bottom piping, the bottom coolant pipe, and it was cold and the top was super hot and it started to boil over. That's why it's kind of smoking right now from the water that wasn't cycling. But finally got it to go, and I know because the heater wasn't blowing any hot air the whole time, and now it's actually blowing hot air now, so it's definitely going through the system. And if you look right in the middle, so I'm just gonna let this go for about 15 to 20 minutes because of the flush. It says to go about 15 minutes or so, and then I'll put the actual coolant in there. All right, so while I'm waiting for this to cycle through and for this finally evaporate all that stuff. All right, so while I'm waiting for the coolant to cycle through this, I think I'm gonna put the, all right, so while I'm waiting for the coolant flush to cycle through the system, I think it's a better time than any to finally put this on for good. There we go. That looks good. Alright, so it's a new day. I cycled through the flush and basically 2.5 gallons of another fill up of distilled water just to make sure we flushed out that the chemicals. And now we are putting actual coolant. So I'm gonna cycle through this, make sure we got everything, all the air out, and we can go take her for a drive for the first time, and since I got her.